So, welcome. My name is Joni Parsons. I'm founder of Rebel 11. We're so happy you are here today to join us. I have always been fascinated by the mind body spirit connection. It drew me in at a very early age, and I started researching all I could about our bodies and our inner wisdom. And it keeps bringing me in over and over again. And you'll see a lot of that on Rebel 11 in the months to come. According to our speaker today, all disease is a loss of wisdom, and we can work with our body's innate knowledge. Isn't that cool? So, well being is within reach for all of us and should be nurtured. We need to take that time to nurture self. Nidhi Pandya is a NAMA certified Ayurvedic doctor, a faculty member at the Shakti School of Ayurveda, and she offers Ayurvedic nutrition courses on onecommune.com. She has been featured in Vogue, Allure, Harper's Bazaar, and many more. And she's the author of a fabulous new book called Your Body Already Knows, which launched yesterday. And I'm so thrilled to welcome you, Nidhi. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's such an honor to be here and with your community. Thank you for having me, Joni.
Well, tell us, I know you grew up in an Ayurvedic household, and tell us about your childhood and how this generational science became a part of your life today.
Absolutely. So, Ayurveda, which is the science of life, literally, and we can talk more about that. So, I grew up in a family where this science of life, which really understands everything around us, within us, how we live, how we eat, how we breathe, and how each human being is so different and our needs are different. So it's a very profound science. But growing up in a family like that, in a large family with 14 members, a joint family, as we call it in
13.
India, 14, seven children, seven adults, amazing, fabulous. My grandfather was an Ayurvedic doctor, which means he was really like this wise person. He had studied the science of life officially. And he passed it on to us as a first language, I say, which meant that he didn't give us disclaimers all day long, saying like, according to Ayurveda, you should eat at this time. According to Ayurveda, you should we never heard that. But what we did hear is simple things which made us as children connected to these patterns of the universe. For example, my mother would say, come back home before you see bats weaving through the sky. So I didn't have a time, but it meant that it just naturally felt like a right recommendation because it felt like nocturnal mammals are coming out and I'm starting to set for the day. My energies, they dwindle for the day. So you start making these connections. Or, for example, don't eat X. Oh, X is going to be hard to digest at night. So why don't you eat it for lunch? Now, again, this taught me as a young girl that, oh, maybe lunch, my digestion is better and X is difficult to digest. So you learn things on the go and you don't realize. Also, bio individuality, being seven children in one house. We would hear my grandfather would say things like, Ruchi, when you go in the sun, you should be a little extra careful. The sun hits you hard. So right there, I was making notes subconsciously about bio individuality as well. And I was naive enough to think the entire world lives like this. Everybody understands this science. And then I realized that people don't. And what a profound way to live. It actually set us free in a way because I just felt so connected to really life and the patterns that exist in life. That health really became this whole something that brought freedom to me. And then I was surprised to see that health to most people means lack of health or fear of disease. And yeah, I felt very empowered. And that's what I want to pass on to people because we all have it in us to
I
know what.
love Well, and to listen to the rhythms of nature and the science of the universe is such a beautiful way to approach life. And we've gotten so far away from it, haven't we?
Oh my God, absolutely. And yet I'd say, right, and I'll say this right now because it's such a strong premise for the conversation we'll be having, is my running joke is that deer doesn't wake up in the morning complaining that, oh my God, I have to wake up in the morning and eat grass. It knows. It knows. It's not going to be tempted to eat anything that it's not meant to eat. And waking up in the morning, it doesn't have to set an alarm. It's so connected to the rhythms. We know animals know what they need to eat when they're sick, when they're nursing, when they know when they're injured, what kind of soil to roll their bodies in. Uh, So we ourselves, we're the most intelligent species. Of course we know, but we've over intellectualized things too much, and we've been lost in information, and we've lost our wisdom as a result because of this information. So there's always hope for us to get back to that wisdom.
Well, and we always, we have been taught as a society to pop pills and, that's going to treat everything that's going on in our body instead of, quieting ourselves and listening. So your new book is called Your Body Already Knows. What do you mean by that?
And so your body already knows is exactly what I said, that we already know. We have cellular intelligence for how we're supposed to live, what we're supposed to eat, what makes us better, and what gets us sick. And so that's the first thing, and it offers comfort and confidence that we carry the wisdom. And the second part is that we've used our minds so much that we've lost the wisdom of our body. We've used our minds to go out there and get information and prescription outside of us. So the book is a journey back to what we already know.
And how do we start listening to our inner wisdom and knowledge?
Right. And so I provide a framework in the book, right? And the framework is based upon the Vedas. Now, the Vedas are the oldest literature out there that exists, right? And it's this large science which has science of everything, science of medicine, science of how do we live well, science of warfare, of intercourse, of fertility, all of that. The Vedas cover literally all of it. And the Vedas were written at a time when we did not have laboratories, but they were written through this one principle. As is the macro, such is the micro. As above, so below. And more, more and more Nobel laureates are actually finding their hypothesis in this Veda and then working backwards to prove it actually in the Vedas. So this concept means that the patterns of the universe are represented in the patterns in the body. And once I understand them, I can start understanding my body a little bit differently and much, much better. And so that is the premise. And based on that premise, I gave a framework which has three principles. Three
Yes, and
principles that,
we'll be talking about those in just a
yeah,
second. I want to get to a
absolutely.
couple of other things before we dive in because I want to go
Pass
deep
that
into
across.
those three principles.
Yes.
So, so what are some of the signals that our body tells us about, and how do we start listening or looking for those? Or can you explain that a little bit more so that we all understand?
Absolutely. Right. And to be honest with you, that framework will give you an exact language of the body. Those three principles are the language that your body speaks. But let's just say you did not even get into those three principles, and yet your body has the power. And I say that there are certain substances and there are certain behaviors which take us away from, which become noise and distance us from the signals of our body. And when I talk about substances or, the environment, it could be caffeine, it could be blue lights, it could be electricity, it could be artificial lighting of all sorts. They take us away from the intelligence of our body because they're creating this simulated environment for us. And we don't listen to normal cues of waking up, of sleeping, of bowel movements, etc., because we are distracted. But also unprocessed triggers. Unprocessed triggers allow basically make us block what we already know because things can feel so painful. So these are two things that all human beings, they have created this artificial life, but also not processing your emotions fully creates a need to distract, creates a need to cope in a way, whether the coping comes through watching excessive TV, working too hard, alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever that is. But all of that distances us from the wisdom of our body. So I tell people that even just working in silence, right? Really slowing down your day will allow you to tune in to how you're really feeling, what your real hunger is, to work with your breath. There are many, many tools. And I'm so excited to share all the tools with people in the book because there are so many tools to just slow down. And the reminder is, when did Newton discover gravity? When he was chilling under a tree, not in his laboratory, when he was really there, really, really present. So anything that makes us less than present takes us away from what our own inner wisdom has.
And we so often don't listen or give our times ourselves the gift of time to really listen in. And I always like the definition of disease meaning dis-ease. And you mentioned the emotional aspect of disease. And how does that tie into Ayurvedic and the three principles that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes?
Beautiful. You've asked one of my most favorite questions, which people seldom ask. So the Ayurvedic texts, right, scriptures in Sanskrit, very clear instructions. They start with this one saying in Sanskrit, which says that every time I go out of equilibrium in my mind, I create attachment, greed, insecurity, fear out of equilibrium. My body starts to feel a restlessness. And that restlessness starts to change my biochemistry, right? When you get restless, you have suddenly cortisol and you have adrenaline. But also, what it does do then, next step, it compels me to take action against my wisdom, right? Which means, oh my God, I know I should,
Fascinating.
but I'm going to be like. So it starts with that. It starts with the fact that every time you go out of, you lose your center, you start creating biochemistry, which is going to create disease, but also just in that restlessness, we make decisions that lead us to disease.
So fascinating. We should be talking about this as a society more and more. And I'm so glad you've written this book so that we can really learn more about how disease starts and our body's wisdom to heal it. So, are there simple ways to restore our balance? And is that what you're talking about with the inner climate, or are those two different things?
So that's exactly that, right, Joni? So the way to come back is through the three principles. They help you in the most simplest way to start coming back into that wisdom. So it's such a big ask for people to say, tap into your wisdom. And I've heard people tell me all kinds of things, but my wisdom says, eat that second bag of chips. My wisdom wants, my body craves ice cream in the midnight. Like, no, that's not your wisdom,
Oh,
right?
excuse me.
Yeah, God bless. So basically, the three principles allow you to come back to that wisdom in the most natural manner.
Okay, so before we get into that, will you talk about the doshas? And this is so much a part of Ayurvedic um, reasoning around what type of body you have. So can you explain the three doshas, the kapha, the pitta, and the vata, so people can understand what they
Yeah,
might be and how you
absolutely.
look at it?
Absolutely. So for everyone, Ayurveda is the science of life. It's what made turmeric famous, bullet coffee famous, oil pulling famous, tongue scraping, neti pots. Just, sometimes people, they don't know what Ayurveda is. And it's, people often know it as the ancient medicine of India, like how there's traditional Chinese medicine, traditional Indian medicine, but it's actually the science of life. Um, and and it understands bio-individuality. So it understands that firstly, every human body has three main functions that are happening at all times. The first one is a building, that's the kapha function, right? For anybody who cares about the terminology and the jargon, our bodies are constantly building new cells, building new matter, protecting, all protective and building elements in the body, whether there is your synovial fluid, your mucus lining, is all kapha elements, new cells, cytoplasm, kapha elements. But your body also is, you're metabolic beings, right? We're constantly metabolizing. All those hot transforming metabolic functions are pitta functions. But, and the third function is there's movement that needs to happen, movement of substances, blood goes in reverse direction, your breath is movement, your nervous impulse has signals. All of this windy movement functions, which are dominated by so-called wind, that's why, for the lack of a better word, it's called wind, they are vata functions. So this makes complete sense that your body is building all the time. There's metabolic activities happening somewhere and movement of substances as well as evacuation, right? It's like the drying. So I'm going, before I even go into like what those body types can look like, I want to go into these functions exist in the universe also, right? So spring is the building time of the year. Then there is summer, which is metabolic time of the earth, right? Fruits and flowers and all of that. And then autumn and winter, which is the movement, windy and decline. So that's everywhere. And if our bodies were doing all three of these in proportion, building appropriately, transforming appropriately, the movement and evacuation and the drying of substances that are not needed, we would never experience disease. However, bio-individuality is that unfortunately, most of us are born with one or the other tendency of, so which means if your body has an exaggerated sense of building, and we call them kapha tendencies, then people might take a quiz, which by the way, no offense to those quizzes, they're really fun, but they're seldom accurate. If you were to take that quiz and you came up as, I'm a kapha dosha, it would mean that your body, and if the quiz was accurate, which it hardly is, it means your body likes to build more, which means it'll build more tissue. You may eat the same amount of food as your friend, but you may build more tissue. That you may be slower, more stagnant, feeling more stuck. And of course, you can do things about it, but basically everything is building. Your memories are building. You may hold on to emotions a little bit longer than they need to. You may hold on to professions, partners longer than you need to. If you got really sick, it would probably look like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, plaque in your arteries, things that are all overnourishing, because your body just likes to hold on. If you were a metabolic being, pitta dosha, if you took a quiz and you said, I'm pitta dosha, it means you're hot, you're on fire, which means your body has all these heat-led functions. You have this sharp metabolism, but you may also be allergic to the sun. You may see redness in your skin. You may see skin eruptions, acidity, burning in your stools. Your hormones could feel really hot. Your periods would be, really, really hot. You could gray sooner. You could wrinkle sooner because your body could burn out sooner. And if you were vata dosha, which means you were dominated by the force of wind, that you could probably have a lot of movement in your body. You could feel very depleted, dry eyes, dry, brittle hair, anxiety, bloating, dry skin. Your sleep may not be the best. You may also be scatterbrained, maybe a little less coordinated. So, most of the time we have a dominance of either one or two of them, one really, really dominant. But since all of us need to do all of these functions, there are chances you could be imbalanced in two of them. And that is basically the idea of doshas. Kapha has a climate which is cold and humid. Think about stagnation, cold and dense and humid. Pitta has a climate which is hot and oily and hot and humid. And Vata is cool and windy in their bodies. If you had to give them
This is such an interesting conversation, and I would encourage you to folks listening today to look into what you are, what you think you might be, because it is fascinating to take a look at how they relate to your own body, like the bio-individualism that Nidhi was talking about. But you talk a lot about the three principles, which we're going to dive into now. The first one being inner climate. What does that mean? And can you explain to us how we start thinking about our own bodies and what inner climate means to us individually?
Absolutely, right? So I talked about like slight climates of Kapha,
Right.
Pitta, Vata, and I talked about the variations of how that climate would look like. Now, the idea of this inner climate principle is that firstly, let's go back to the macro. I must explain it systematically. So the macro, in the entire universe, life exists only on planet Earth because the climate is right. 4.5 billion years from single cell organisms, we've become these full-blown mammals because the climate was right. Now the climate is wrong and we're feeling threatened. So if you want to grow something also, for example, tomatoes will not grow in Alaska. You need the right climate for any species to survive. Our body is home to trillions of microorganisms known as microbiome. We are the universe. And now more and more than ever before, science is linking the function of everything, your immune system, your nervous system, your gut, your hormones, everything is related to this microbiome. They've discovered, oh my God, these little buggers are happy. You're going to be happy and healthy. You don't need to do anything else. So there's a climate, there's an optimum climate inside, which we must maintain for them to be happy and for our immune system and our detox mechanisms to be upgraded so you're never worrying about getting sick. What is that climate? And if we had time, I would do this with you in a little bit longer fashion, but for the interest of time, I always have people just cup, your hands and exhale into it a few times. What is your breath? It is warm and moist. As mammals, so if you do it a few times, you'll see that your breath is warm and moist. As mammals, we are warm-blooded. If you've ever gone for a blood test and you held the test tube, it's warm and it's moist. Mother's milk, if you're nursing, is warm and moist. Reproductive fluids are warm and moist. Your urine is warm and moist. If you went to pee one day and you realize, oh my God, this is really hot, it would feel odd, right? Your microbiome, the environment where the gut thrives, it used to be called flora and fauna in the past. Where does flora and fauna thrive the most outside? In Florida and March, where it's warm and moist. What kind of people do we like? Warm people. Nobody ever teaches us what that is. We like warm. What type of emotions do we like? Love, gratitude, compassion. Anger is too hot. Depression is too stagnant. So warm and moist, what type of a room you like? You wouldn't like if a room was too dry. You wouldn't like it if a room was too sticky. Right moisture. You wouldn't like it too cold. You wouldn't like it too hot, warm. Warm and moist is where kapha, pitta, vata are in balance. Now this is a little bit more, it's a technical formula, but if you were to bring a place where you're building your building abilities, your metabolic abilities, and your movement and decline abilities are all in balance, that place is warm and moist. So that inner climate is warm and moist. Most people have deviated from this. Either they're too hot and inflamed, they're cold and sluggish, and building in their bodies become sedentary, or they're just super scatterbrained and they're just dry, cold and dry. So we work towards bringing you back into warm and moist. The remarkable part is, Joni, when I looked at all the other ancient cultures that knew a thing or two about health and wellness, they all followed the same principles without calling
That's
warm.
fascinating.
Because if you look at fermented foods, right, like in East Asia,
Yes.
all fermentation is a warm and moist process. We talk about fermentation is so good for your probiotic environment and your prebiotic environment. It's setting the stage. I don't think a large amount of fermented foods can really set your gut on fire because it can become too hot. But like that little kimchi, that little olive or sauerkraut or pickle creates that the process of fermentation is always heat and moisture driven.
Yes. And I
So
just want to interrupt just for a second. So we had an author on last week talking about the Korean lifestyle, and we talked about how important it is to have fermented food and kimchi. And it's a beautiful conversation and a beautiful book. You can, our audience can check it out on Rebel 11. There's so many similarities, and it was so interesting that we talked about the Korean lifestyle this week and then Ayurvedic and Indian lifestyle this week. So I'm so grateful. So continue. I'm sorry to
so
interrupt.
cool. No, that's amazing. And I love, like, I do a lot of research on other cultures of the world, and I realize, somehow nobody articulated this. Neither did the Ayurvedic texts articulate this directly. It's something that I stumbled upon. I suspect that, but it's like every evidence shows that people are just moving towards warm and moist. And in that state, right, Joni, your immune system thrives consistently, constantly.
That's what we need. We need that desperately as humans, and our society has gotten so off base from being connected to ourselves that we don't understand what all of these things that you're saying that can bring us back into balance.
Absolutely. And I want to say one last thing, right? Like global warming outside is very much like inflammation inside. We become so hot, so what I call solar, caffeine, alcohol, overworking, overexercising, overproductivity, staying up, so much heat in our system. And that's taken us away. And no wonder we're all inflamed all the time. Inflammation is one of the leading causes of chronic disease and death eventually. So it's very much like that. It's always as above, so below. And the inner climate teaches you the method, teaches you how to bring this warm and moist in your foods, in your lifestyles, in your relationships. How do you, when you feel the trigger, hot and dry triggers, how do you regulate and come back to warm and moist? So in your sleep, in every single area of your life, you just want to come back to warm and moist, because that is where life thrives. That is where relationship thrives. That's where everything thrives.
Thank you so much for explaining that inner climate of ours. So the second principle is circadian rhythm. Talk to us about our circadian. That's so hard for me to say.
Circadian
Circadian
rhythms, yeah.
rhythm.
So that this has become a big buzzword in the medical world.
Mhm.
I find it fascinating that Ayurveda enumerated this whole clock of the sun in such great detail, beyond what you can imagine, beyond what science is finding out today, right? So uh, we are very connected. We are diurnal mammals. We are not bats. We are not tigers. We hunt and we kind of stay up in the day. We rise with the sun and we sleep with the sun. And there are 6 phases of the day. And how do I know? How are you going to remember this as a listener? Anybody who's listening to this is not because I'm saying so, because I want you to start relating it in your mind. So the morning phase between the early hours of 6 and 10 what happens outside. If you ever to were walk on grass, it would be cold, soggy, dewy. That is exactly the climate of our body inside because we are related to the clock of the sun. So early in the morning, you could experience nasal congestion. If you're trying to show off in a yoga class, you don't have, you have thicker joints, your body is barely waking up, just as the earth is barely waking up. In this time where your body is still a little cold from the night where the moon was out, if you're going to drink cold smoothies, cold protein shakes, cold fruit, you're going to slow that. Your fire is not even started and you're putting that off. And so that's a great time in that morning, 6 to 10, to exercise, to warm up your body, to eat a light, warm breakfast. So it helps you to design your day. Then the
I thought
next,
it was, oh, sorry. So,
no, no,
I
tell
thought
me,
it
tell
was so
me.
interesting about smoothies at that time of the morning because so many of us drink smoothies, and it was the antithesis of what I thought. So, why is it so important not to freeze your body with a smoothie in the morning?
Yeah, and firstly, like the climate is warm and moist in our body, and we're trying so desperately to come to the warm and moist. I mean, unless all metabolic activity is warm, right? I mean, if you want to cook, even if you want to charge your phone, you need electricity. To think you need that kind of mental fire. And here you are early in the morning when your digestive enzymes are just praying to come out and come to life. It's like the sun is rising in your body. And then you say, let's do a snowstorm inside. Like you need the warmth. You're warm-blooded metabolic beings and with hot, nice, juicy enzymes and mucus lining. And then people often tell me, oh, you know what? My breakfast is so healthy, 200 calories. I just have a big smoothie and I don't feel hungry. Of course, you're not going to feel hungry because your fire has not even come out. It's like this cloudy day inside, and then long term, your microbiome gets affected seriously. The microbiome is just the climate. It's that climate, and then life will keep growing. Microbiome will keep growing as long as it's warm and moist inside. So this is the snowstorm early in the morning when you're really trying hard from that cold and soggy night to come back into the day. Hours between 10 and 2, the sun is at its peak outside, right? Super plants cannot dare to do photosynthesis without that sun. How can we digest our meals if the sun is not out? 10 to 2 time, hot outside, hot inside. Great time to get your most productive collaborative work done because your mind is focused. All offices are the busiest between 10 and 2 in the world. But also people who skip lunch can become hangry, because your digestive fire is begging gastrin juices, your insulin sensitivity is the highest. You can break down whatever you eat. Great time to eat your big lunch, get your work done. Around 3 o'clock, oh, that's what happens, right?
Yes.
Wind outside, wind inside. You can notice the wind in your joints. You can notice the dwindling of your day. Great time to do some breath work, slow down, get peppermint tea. But if you were to do caffeine during this hour, you would block what we call your adenosine receptors, which means your body would lose connection with how tired it is. Like literally, the receptor is blocked. So between 2 and 6, as the sun sets, slow down a little bit, leave the easy email stuff to do, go get some fresh air if you need to, stretch your body a little bit. 6 to 10, by the way, we were never supposed to be dinner eating species because before we had electricity, which urbanized, in electricity came into urban homes not before 1930s, and that's when chronic disease actually began. If you look at the numbers, before that, we were not sitting and eating dinner and having dinner parties at 8:30. It was supper. It was drinking your soup. That's why people say so you're not drinking, eating your soup. The reason why you eat your soup is because that was your dinner, basically. So around 6 o'clock to eat a light meal, and then 6 to 10, as the birds go back and as diurnal mammals, you want to start winding down. Once in a while, we all go out, you all do things, right? But in your mind, you want to start preparing, even if you're outside, slow down and not have the argument of the day. 10 to 2, magical repair happens in the middle of the night when you're sleeping. Your lymphatic system, which cleans out your thoughts, processes everything for free, repairs all the cells that are broken, generates new cell, all happens between 10 and 2 at night. Very often people wake up at 2 o'clock to pee in a sweat because it's the end of that metabolic cycle at night while you're sleeping. And then 2 to 6 is this light time where your body is light and happy. So either you stay in bed, because if you wake up, it's hard to fall back asleep between 2 and 6 because your body is so light. Also, a great time to meditate, do yoga nidra, any of that. So the circadian rhythm explains these 6 cycles
Mhm.
and teaches people how you can design your day for maximum efficiency, productivity, and rest as well.
I love living by the science of the universe. Thank you so much for explaining the circadian rhythms. The third principle is growth, transformation, and decline.
And again, this is very similar to the building transformation and decline. But what this states is that everywhere in life, right, these three cycles exist during the day. The morning is that wet building time of the day. Afternoon is really transformation is happening outside. The sun is drying up. And then the evening is windy. It's the setting of the day. Even in our bodies, our childhood is all building, where juicy cytoplasm is abundant. That's why you can grow so quickly with a small meal. As you hit adolescence, it's the transformation time from all the way to 13 to 60 till women hit their menopause and men, in their 60s. That's your transformation, the most productive time on the planet. And then you go into decline. A fruit grows, that's building, that its growth phase, it ripens, transformation, and then it declines. So these three phases are inevitable. They're going to happen everywhere. And understanding and recognizing them teaches you how to interact with something depending on the phase it's in, how to interact with the day depending on the phase, on the seasons depending on whether it's the growth of the spring or the transformation in the summer or the decline of the winter. But it also teaches you the transience of everything. And it says these are the cycles of nature. These are even true in relationships, right? Initially, you're building, building, building. You meet somebody, you have chemistry, you build, you take that heat, you start transforming. Oh, listen, we got married, we became best friends, and then you stop building, it'll start declining. So just to understand this kind of nuanced reality that exists everywhere. So your transience and things you cannot change, and where intangible stuff like relationships, you want to remember to keep building so you can keep transforming. So I go into detail about how you can interact with these three cycles everywhere you look.
So, with these three cycles, and when we slow down to pay attention to our biorhythms, how do we start building a more intuitive approach to wellness?
So one of the first things that I say, right, is if it's not warm and moist, it's creating disease. So for example, Joni, I'm driving down the street and I get a call and I feel really triggered. I can feel the heat in my chest, or I get into a car accident. I can feel so it starts even from starting there, right? You notice, hey, this is making me lose equilibrium. Now I make it more somatic, more palpable. You can experience the heat and dry. So I give people a toolkit. Whether you can use breath, you can use music, you can use a certain cue, you can have a safe place, but you come back to warm and moist and you come back to that. And that's the first step, to always to create a toolkit so you can continuously coming back to equilibrium. But also using these three principles, you design your day in a way that works towards. There's a great amount of research that I've done in neurotransmitters. Your neurotransmitters support exactly what I'm telling you. This is the awake hours, this is the sleeping hours, this is the food hours, this is. So you want to start designing your day. You set one rhythm, you'll set all the rhythms. The minute people start living like this and they stop eating that heavy dinner and sleeping on time, they will see that they have a bowel movement in the AM. They'll see their periods come back. They sleep much deeper. They have a natural hunger. Their moods are more regulated. We know that if we experience winter, like snow in spring, you're going to be like, oh, this is freaky. And yet we're okay changing the seasons of our body, like living against the season, fooling our body. Oh, no, no, this is morning time and it's actually 2 a.m. at night. So our body feels so threatened with what's happening. So the minute you start setting those circadian rhythms, you'll see that old rhythms come back. But also, you know, eating those warm and moist foods, which means cooked foods, by the way. If anybody does research on cooking, they'll realize that we became this species after we started cooking our foods. I hate to say this, but raw foods have a little bit of their place, but you cannot nourish you the same way. And even raw foods were eaten with what? What are salads eaten with? Olive oil, moist, vinegar, warm, because of the fermentation. So nobody ever ate so you want to start bringing in cooking your foods, spicing your foods, having good fats in your foods. So there's a systematic process, and you can bring this to all areas of your life very systematically. Even suppose, for example, you're burnt out, you're going to go for hot yoga, you're adding more heat to your heat. So I teach people how to identify their inner climate, where they are. And then how do you come back to that warm and moist? You start noticing. Balance all the solar things you do with some lunar things. So we're very solar in our generation. Always you working, always burning. burning our candle at both ends.
At both ends,
So
always.
just keep coming
And
back
so,
to
so tell us about how mindset plays a role in your health. When we talked a little bit about dis-ease, looking at disease, but how does our mind and our thinking and our thoughts play a role in our health as you see it?
So once again, right, our mind is so first thing, our mind is also what has become our enemy. It's allowed us to overthink and lose our wisdom. But at the same time, right, I talk about that you think about emotions, it starts right there, right? And unprocessed emotions kind of become storms in our system and they take us out of equilibrium. And every emotion which is not love, gratitude, and compassion is not warm and moist. So, for example, in our mindset, right, being in on overdrive, being overly passionate, being overly hot, you already know that it's heating. We all have that somebody that was in college that was so driven, and then we met them when they were in their 40s and they were all burnt out, right? So you want, or you have a mindset of being completely stagnant, overly lunar. Oh, I'm not gonna, it's okay. I'm not gonna get there. That's again not warm and moist. That again is a little bit more stagnant, a little bit more away from that central heat. So you want to start identifying if you fall in any of these categories. And the truth is, there could be an area of your life you're overly driven and passionate, and some area where you're overly neglectful and stagnant. But you want to keep coming back to that warm and moist. And they're usually because of unprocessed experiences in those areas, right? Either somebody told you, oh, if you don't work hard, then you're never going to have a good life. You have somebody said something to you as an impressionable child, or you've had an experience and that stays with you. And even by contrast, right? Like something is so painful, you don't want to even address it. So you become stagnant and stuck in that area of your life. Um, Waking up early in the morning or whatever that is for you, right? So you want to start creating self-awareness. And you want a very gentle, loving approach. And that's why I give people this 21-day plan journey. So you don't have to do it all overnight. Let me do the work for you. Let your body
So,
do the work for you.
So I'm really excited to hear more about the 21-day reset. My partner and I were talking last night. I definitely want to dive in as soon as possible on this opportunity to reset my body. But can you explain what the purpose of the reset is, and then how does it help rewire the body's natural intelligence? Let's dive into this
Right.
21-day reset.
Right. So, if you look at people I talk about the thing, the reset, but I also want to talk about like when you look at indigenous wisdom and you're like, how did these people know this? If you look at tribes, you're like, how do they know this, right? Because they're living in accordance with those rhythms of nature. So what this 21-day does, right? All our baseline is shifted. How do we know homeostasis today? Through numbers on an exam, through the lack of disease, we know homeostasis, but we cannot experience it. We've forgotten how to experience it. So once you understand this warm and moist, you understand the circadian rhythms, you've learned and you create awe of this working of the universe, you start understanding slowly your place in it. And you start understanding your inner verse very, very well. But then that means now you got to make
Yeah.
changes, right? Now you got to make changes. And
Mhm.
the 21 days allows you in a most loving manner. You first day, for example, you work on your meals. Second day, you work on changing the order of lunch and breakfast. Third day, and as you're doing this, and as you're doing this mindfully, staying very much in touch with what's happening inside, you start reawakening. You start living with these cosmic laws that exist. And as you start living with these cosmic laws, you become one with that cosmic law. And the
Mhm.
more you do it in awe and wonder, it's not, what's the sad part, Joni? So firstly, you do this for 21 days. You bring it to your exercise, you bring it to your mindset, you bring it to your relationships, you bring it to your sleep, you bring it to all areas of your life. You also, I give you some daily rituals, Ayurvedic daily rituals, and I explain why they bring warm and moist. For example, oiling your body is one of the biggest gifts of Ayurveda to the world. And oil is what? It's warm and moist. And you oil your body, you start feeling cozy, warm and moist. It promotes the production of brown fat. It grounds your nervous system. It lowers your cortisol, all scientifically proven. But also that oil helps microbiome that is healthy, which is lipophilic. It loves to eat fat and survive on fat. It promotes that. So I also teach some of those daily rituals and how they bring you back to warm and moist. But what is
So,
really
so Nidhi, is oil swishing a part of that?
yes, it is
Yes,
absolutely.
okay. And can you
Oil
explain
fishing
that?
is
Because we
Ayurveda.
talked about that in our description. I just want to make sure we touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So oil pulling is the same thing, right? So everywhere you want, if you want life to survive, and like nobody had labs for the 4.5 billion years that we existed, and we just kept evolving and evolving into species. So you just need to get the climate right. So the mouth climate, also the ideal climate is warm and moist. The oil pulling, and the oil has a specific ability to hydrate and yet detox. So when you oil pull, especially with sesame oil, you take a spoonful of oil, or a mouthful rather, and you just swish it around for in your mouth for 2 or 3 minutes. And you have to feel the difference in 3 weeks, because it's massive just in 3 weeks. What that oil does, it gets into all your little cavities, little spaces, little holes everywhere, and it takes grime out of it. It'll pull grime out of out of that, and then you spit it out. You don't swallow it, you spit it out, and then you can just rinse your mouth with warm water. But then what also happens is that once this kind of environment starts shifting, bacteria cannot grow, cavities are not formed. You'll see that your dental alignment has changed suddenly. If you have gingivitis, it's gone. On your next visit to the dentist is like, you're finally, and many people have reported this, by the way, right? They're white, their teeth become whiter, their breath smells better, and they have better appetite. And the dentist is like, whatever you've been doing is working. And it's not your everyday cleaning. This
Fascinating.
is how you do it. It's fascinating. And that's why I tell everybody, you should just try it for yourself for 3 weeks. You go to the dentist before, and then you go to the dentist after, and you see the difference it makes. And you look at your breath. Like sometimes when people eat a lot of onions, like this is what I do, right, Joni? Sometimes I've eaten onions and I'm like, oh my God, now I have to go for a meeting and I'm smelling like this is onion farm. I'll just oil pull and I'll go.
And a couple of questions in the chat. It was sesame oil. And do you do this every day for the 21 days?
No, so in the 21-day plan, I will introduce you to the practice at some point. I
Okay,
don't want
got
you to
it.
do anything overnight. I will say that my approach is very loving and it is very gentle. And
Good.
I've given you like a lot for this hour. But in the book, I tell you, I teach you I hold your hand, I ask you to do it every day, to bring one shift every single day so that you don't even realize it. And it also teaches you mastery. But otherwise, let's say it's a practice you want to adopt, you can do it every day.
And the 21-day reset, it builds upon itself. So it's not overwhelming. You made it that way on purpose. Like you said, it's a very loving approach to health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very loving approach to health. And it doesn't just, it builds up. So first day, I teach you a very simple practice, which will naturally awaken your cellular intelligence towards your food. Second day, you just start having a warm breakfast. Third day, so you just, and you keep building on it every day. You build on it. And then after the 21 days, I give you this playbook. And in that playbook, you can decide what you absolutely don't want to keep. And you also get to decide how you'll do this on vacations, how you'll do this when you're socializing, how you'll do this on super busy days. So you don't feel the pressure of, I have to do everything every day.
I think that this is such a marvelous thing. We can all do something for 21 days and dedicate that time to our health and to, really look at living with nature and the laws of the universe. It's just such a beautiful practice that's ancient, and I just am very excited to try this. And getting back, you say that it gets us back to our natural intelligence. Can you define that just a bit more? Like what kind of changes would I see in my body or in anyone
Yeah.
that's doing this reset?
And the most beautiful part about people have reported, and I also teach this as a program, that and I tell people that don't tell others that you're doing this. Don't tell people, but just see what happens. And they'll say, people will say, oh my God, you look happier. Your skin is glowing. You're feeling, your vibe, like what's going on? Are you in love? Your hair is looking better. And you won't notice so much of the change right away, right? You won't notice it because it's so natural and organic. It's not like I'm working out like so hard in the gym and now I can feel but your body, it'll be so connected to nature that you will have to just be like, wow, when did this happen? When did I start sleeping better? Because you're not connected to minutia, you're connected to a larger theme. And that's exactly how I wanted this to be, that I wanted you to not even, I wanted these changes to just sneak up upon you, but for them to be so big and profound that others tell you what you're experiencing. And those are the only changes that are sustainable, right? Because if they felt like effort, if they were extremely outcome oriented, which they will still give you amazing outcomes, then they feel like, oh, too much work.
Yes. Well, I think that it's so interesting that people are just like, what kind of oil is it? And what do we
Yeah,
do?
you
And
can answer
you
the
know,
question.
it's all outlined in Nidhi's new beautiful book called The Body Already Knows. And a couple of questions here. Somebody said, what about organic coconut oil? And then how long do you pull for? Um, so could you explain that briefly? And again, I just want to note that her beautiful book just came out yesterday. So it's online and we added a link to it here in the chat.
So the oil that you want to use is not coconut, it's sesame. Some people use coconut, but coconut will hydrate and maybe replenish the microbiome, but it won't pull grime out of your, it's very thick lipids. It won't penetrate into all of those little gaps. Uh, so it's sesame oil is the most ideal.
Thank you so much. Are there other lifestyle changes that we should look at making during this cleanse or this reset and also throughout our other life? Like you had mentioned, massaging feet in the afternoon, in the evening. Are there other tips that you have for lifestyle additions or subtractions?
So I will tell you that this is not a program, it's a reprogram. So it's a reset, but it's not a cleanse, which means that your
Yes.
body naturally starts healing. You start living like this. I give you a whole new formula to live, which doesn't feel so far off there. You're like, these are the smallest of changes which are going to have the biggest impact. So you don't stop doing these things after 21 days. You continue to do it for the rest of your life. And it is in the most sustainable way you can bring change because you've understood it. You've connected with why you're doing it, not through prescription, but through wisdom. You connect it to the wisdom and then you take it forward.
And as we're closing today, do you have a couple of other messages for our audience that you would like to leave them with today?
All I can tell everybody is that I know that there's a lot of information out there, but I want you to think that the more information you have, the more overwhelming you have. The more you rely upon the outside expert, the less you can rely upon yourself. All our ancestors were able to follow this, to tap into their deep intelligence. If you give enough time to your rest and repair as you give to working, overworking is overrated. Learn to come back, sit in silence, become quiet, exhale longer, rest deeper, and take those moments like Newton under that tree and be ready to receive because you want to be looking when the universe throws something magical at you as an insight.
There's magic around us everywhere if we take the time to notice and to live in awe and wonder. And will you talk a little bit about the importance of that pause and of meditation in this practice as well?
Absolutely right. And I'll tell you that our bodies, when they're on the go, which is even in the mind when they're on the go, right? The entire biochemistry, what's remarkable, right? If you look the same, eyes, nose, but your chemistry, biochemistry can be completely different at two different points in the day, which means when you're go, 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 the what's running through your blood, cortisol, adrenaline, glucose, is very different from when your body is feeling safe and in its parasympathetic rest and digest mode, where your digestion is at the optimum. And in that state, right, you kind of lose sense of time and space. There's a relaxed experience that your body is having. And when you lose sense of time and space and you become really present, you stop aging. And that's when insights drop into your system. If you realize some of the best ideas you've had or realizations, they've been in the shower or when you were just driving because you were so present. You just lost sense of all the worries of your life. It is, in the book, I offer a toolkit that even if meditation is not your thing, I offer a breath practice where through the exhales, you tune into the present moment, through other tools and techniques, through music. But it is so important because without that, you're running your car on empty till it breaks down. And that is used to be considered a virtuous formula. Luckily, we're realizing today it's not. Don't do hard work, do soft work. You're still working, but it's deep, you know, and it's soft, and only then it can sustain. So you want to sustain your fire. You want your fuel. Don't just use your fire, refuel it, because then you burn like an oil lamp, which burns longer, or you'll burn out like a matchstick.
And which one would we prefer? That was so beautiful. Thank you. And I want to end on that because that was just such a beautiful way to uh, remind us all to take that time to pause, to seek awe and beauty, to give ourselves a rest, and it will make us better. It will make us so much better. And so, how can people reach you and get more information? I know you have a robust Instagram page.
I have an Instagram page. I have a website, nidhi.me, and I run this 21 day as a program. You can get my book. And I think I'm going to answer Mary Ann's question really quick that do you need to declutter your life? Mary, I will do that for you. I will help you. There's an clearing your space exercise. You don't have to do any work when you come and you read the book. You don't have to do any work when you come before the program. I will help you day by day, holding your hand to do it in a way that you don't even realize and it's been done.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you, Nidhi, so much for joining us on just right after your book is launched. I'm so happy for you, and it must have been such a journey to write that. And I wish you so much success. And I just know that this is a message that all of us need. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, not only with us, but with the world.
I appreciate it. Thank you,
Thank
Joni.
you
Thank
so
you very
much.